All set. Okay, we're going to call to order the Narragansett Town Council work session. Today is Monday, February 5th, 2024, and the time is 6:02. Today's work session is with local state legislators to discuss updates on any upcoming legislation that may impact municipalities and to discuss the Town Council current goals and priorities of the town. So this was a call to order. Actually, this was recommended for us getting together as a council and legislators. Councilor Kopech had reached out, and we haven't really done this before, so this is a great opportunity. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our state legislators for representing the town so well. We used to have 4 legislators representing the town. Now it's with the redistricting, we have 3. So joining us tonight are Carol Hagan-McEntee, Senator Alana DeMario, and Rep. Teresa Tanzi. So thank you again for everything you do. The way we'll do this work session is that any council members that have questions or comments can ask, and it'll be kind of a collaborative work session. And if there's anything that you would like to update us with any updates from the legislative session, I know there's always priorities there as well. Our town also has priorities that we're working on, and I think we have similar priorities this year, which is housing. We also have, on this side, we have our community development director joining us on this side of the table, and it's Mike DeLuca. Councilor Ferrandi's here tonight, Councilor Kopech, and Councilor Lawler. So I'll just start off with, just last year's legislative session that we had. We we had some surprises at the end of the session. So this year we're really trying to keep on top of it. We want to thank Senator DeMario for helping us when it came to the Senate floor, when we were surprised with a piece of legislation, and then Rep. McEntee for really taking that up and trying to avert some legislation that would have affected our town, against what we were really working on to help housing here. So there are some other pieces of legislation that we're going to keep on track of. We're just keeping up to date on it, and that's going to include like anything that pertains to housing legislation. We've already noticed that there's a lot of activity at the State House with in pertaining to housing legislation. So in particular, that's going to affect other municipalities as well. So at this point, I'm just going to turn it over to any council member that would like to speak on anything or has any questions to ask our legislators.
I'll start.
Okay, Councilor Kopech.
Good evening, and thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. It was actually Alana's idea, and we just discussed it, and I thought it was a really good one to have you folks here so that we can know what your legislative concepts are for this session, and also so we can give you some ideas about ours. So first, I'd like to, it feels like I'm in a huddle, we do this every year. I'd like to know what your specific areas of interest are for this particular session. So, Carol?
Well, we're not completely done yet.
I know.
So
I
a
know,
lot of
it's
our
early.
bills I'm still working on. A lot of my bills I'm still working on, and working with Alana on several bills we have together. Mm-hmm. The bottle bill is something I have a study commission on right now, so I'm working a lot on that. I got the bond issue for the high school in South Kingstown. We will be passing, hopefully this week, a bill that Alana and I both sponsored, which is the outdoor dining bill, so that we're going to make that permanent. I'm really happy about that. And I did talk with Mike DeLuca. He sent me several emails. And I think we have a sub-A that I'm guessing he's more satisfied with. Yeah. Okay. At least we had a meeting of the minds, I would say, on most of the issues on it. So I think you're going to like the way it comes out. It has to be passed before February 15th because the sunset date on outdoor dining with the moratorium on zoning ordinances is up that day. So a lot of work went into this from the League of Cities and Towns, from Mike DeLuca in Narragansett, and many others. But I think we finally came to an agreement, and it should be great for Rhode Islanders, dining outside. I think it's a great idea. And it's good for business. And especially down here, it's very, why not? Who doesn't want to sit outside in the summer in Narragansett? Let's face it. Other than that, I have some judiciary bills that I'm interested in. Once again, I have the statute of limitations for childhood sexual abuse to get that retroactive as to institutions. And as you can see, just recently with St. Mary's Home, this issue never goes away. And so Alana and I are both doing that bill as well. I think that's about it. I mean, I have several other bills right now. I don't know if they would be of interest to you. Some of them are in sexual assault area, others with food, trying to get food out to people, tax credits for donating food, things like that. So,
Okay.
and I'm working on a bill with to finance the ocean, rejuvenating the beaches. I'm still working on that one. I don't know how that's going to come out yet. So,
It's probably years.
but
in
we
the
need
making.
money. Money is key to replenishing the sand on all of our beaches in the South County, Newport, everywhere. And if we don't do it, we're going to lose a lot of tourism. And that's our #1 economic engine in Rhode Island. So I'm very cognizant of that. I'm well aware of what's going on in Narragansett. I've been with Jim and CRMC to the mouth of the river to see what are we going to do about that. Now, I can throw that back at you guys. Where are we going with that? But we'll talk about, I've talked to Ever, I've talked to Jill, I've talked to Jim. So we're all kind of on the same page. We've been talking to Jack Reed and Seth Magaziner. So hopefully we'll get some relief financially for whatever we have to do as far as dredging the mouth if we get to that point. But anyway, I don't want to take the whole time. Sorry.
Should we keep going? Okay, so Alana?
No, that was great because you covered a lot of the ground that I that I wanted to cover. So, yeah, I'm fortunate to team up both with Representative McEntee and with Representative Tansey on a lot of my priority issues. I do just want to say thanks again for having us in because Councilor Kopech and I were speaking about the possibility of doing something like this. Is just understanding the kind of the rhythm and the timing of our session, because obviously you folks meet year-round. The legislature is really confined to a very shortened schedule, with kind of a number of different deadlines embedded within there. So as Rep. McEntee said, we are kind of still in the process of having our bills drafted. Currently, I have a couple of different buckets of areas that I'm working on. So I am serving as the chair of the Environment and Agriculture Committee in the Senate. And so not only do I have a number of bills related to things like coastal resiliency issues, funding for climate work, those types of things, but also I oversee all of those bills that come in through our committee, especially in terms of energy system transitions. We also see a lot of different things about like land conservation, farmland preservation. So those are definitely a big area of my attention. And then in addition, mostly due to the fact that it is very closely related to my day job, I'm really focused on mental health resources. We are really under-resourced down here in Washington County when it comes to mental health care access, especially for children. That is one of the areas that Rep. Tansey and I team up on quite frequently, and I'm very focused on making sure that as we build out our statewide 988 system and stand up our CCBHCs, our community mental health care centers, that South County is not left out of that process and that we have those appropriate resources, because oftentimes we're kind of the last thought of down here with that. And going along with that is also focusing a lot on workforce pipelines. So we have a very difficult time in a number of healthcare professions, and I'm sure Councilwoman Dzerzhinsky knows about this, from her perspective, but we have a really difficult time recruiting and maintaining healthcare professionals, and so that's going to be a big focus of ours this year as well.
Okay. Teresa?
Thank you. I'll just build off of what each has said. There literally are twice as many reps as there are senators. So for every bill that one of us sponsors, the Senate is responsible for twice the load. So I'm also working a lot with Senator DeMario and around youth mental health, the 988, as we continue to implement that, making certain that the resources are in fact distributed equally throughout the state. Sitting on House Finance, I see that I fought to be on House Finance because I was there wasn't anyone from all of Washington County on finance when I, was, in the General Assembly. So they literally were forgetting about us for everything, every consideration. So I see myself as, the person there reminding them that we do have a population center, that we do have needs down here. When it comes to prescription drugs, the FDA has just allowed the states to do importation from Canada. So that's something that I have, as well as a reference rate. I'm looking at a floor and a ceiling as to what it is that we are willing to pay for our drugs, since the federal government does such a terrible job at negotiating prices for our pharmaceuticals compared to Europe and Canada. I have a bill that would change the definition of an employee to cover interns, volunteers, and apprentices. Also people who are household folks who work in your home, whether they be childcare or any type of household employee, someone who comes to clean your house. All of these things, these folks would be covered. They're currently exempt from discrimination laws. So their civil rights are not protected under our state's definition of what an employee is. So I'm working to change that. Also in the hot and cold emergencies, our heat emergencies in the summer and our cold emergencies in the winter, I have a bill in this year that will ask each town and city to create a plan for how to address the needs of those who are unhoused and those who are experiencing no power at their home and are unable to do that. So they can work in conjunction with neighboring towns to create a place, but we do need to have something advertised and ready to go, a plan as these incidences become more frequent, so that folks know where to go. So that's something that is another of my priorities. Smoking in casinos, I don't know if that is going to come out this year or not, but I'm trying to ban smoking there. And lots of stuff around mental health parity, making sure that providers are paid so that we can continue to maintain our workforce that is here. And again, around mass transit and housing. I chair the Human Services Subcommittee in Finance, so all of that money is something that I'm working on 3 days a week. So I'm just keeping pace on that.
Okay. We'll give somebody else a chance.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, yeah, Councilor Ferrandi had wanted to.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Teresa, Alana, and Carol. I appreciate all your service, and it's really appreciated and thoughtful. I'd like to talk about a couple of individual. I'm going to focus on the affordable housing issue and how the, URI not having enough dormitory is affecting everything, and the town of Narragansett is getting kind of all convoluted of who we are and what we are because of a lot of this affordable housing. One issue is that sometimes in the past, in the session last year, there was a couple of bills that came up that had to do with, there's a couple definitions of a household and, how many people in a house and unrelated. And some of these, there's one this year again that says one person per bedroom. It used to be no more than 3 unrelated. So, but there's several that come up that have like a one person change in it, one crossed out and something new, and it actually turns the whole old law or ordinance totally upside down. So this is what, and to me, there's only one reason for that. I don't know what the genesis of these ordinances are or these bills, but it seems like this one was H 7272. This one's from Baginski, DeSimone, and Solomon. This is this year, and they won, so this
Steve,
one,
can I
Yeah.
stop you for a second? That bill has been withdrawn. There are
Okay.
2 other bills that you're probably, the one you may want to look at is 7382.
yeah, I have that, that's where I was going to
Okay.
go next,
But
okay.
she withdrew 7272.
Oh, okay, yes, because that one has some of the similar sponsors.
I just didn't want you to go on about it.
No,
'cause
no,
it's
that's
gone.
fine, that's fine. I was gonna mention the other one. I didn't really realize why it was, it had changed. But this particular one, just like last year, had one person per bedroom not to exceed more than 5 unrelated. Now, most of the towns in the state, matter of fact, more than 4 have a 3 unrelated. No less than 3 is what the state law says. So I believe, I know Mike's done some research, it's at least 50 or more % of the towns have already a 3 unrelated. So if something like this passes or gets through, then this is going to every other town. Now, and I can understand with the affordable housing issue, how it gets a little convoluted. If you're really for affordable housing and you need the bedrooms, people say, well, why aren't we putting more people in these bedrooms? And I understand that, and I think, but Narragansett's getting clouded because in Narragansett, it doesn't work that way. What happens is, it's hard for us to get any affordable housing, and because the rental market is so strong, it fills up with students in the wintertime, and, rent and summer rentals, which we've had forever in the summer. So we're losing population. We've lost, we've lost some housing, some full-time housing. We've lost residents, over 8% of the residents in the last 10 years of census. So we don't have enough people that really want to put roots down here. So my point is, if you could help us out, or if you could at least, these one-word things just to totally scratch it out and not really think of it as total and say, hey, Narragansett's built a little differently. We want the affordable housing. We want, we got a short-term rental coming up tonight to try to get going with that. So this is what we really want. And what we really need is URI is help, is actually, personally, I think they're, maybe not by their own volition, but they're causing some of the short-term, some of the affordable housing issues by not putting enough dormitories in town. And, obviously, it's been a golden opportunity for the people to rent down here, for the students. So we look like, we're the bad guy by saying, no, we want to have a little balance in our town. So Narragansett is very, very unique in that case, and I can go on about the different issues and the nuances, but, we don't, we've had our zoning. I live on a house that has 8 bedrooms. Now, we've corrected our zoning. For a long time, it wasn't really that, it allowed a lot of this. Didn't have the different ordinances in there. So we're getting better at that. We had to have a building moratorium. So, I don't know if from the speaker down, all of these ordinances, if there's as much thought goes to dig into Narragansett to really who we are. Because I think we're defined by everybody that comes down in the summer and says, oh, it's such a great town, but when you have to live here, like a lot of places, all the issues start to come up. Right. So we could use a little help from URI, number one, and I don't know if you have meetings with them. I don't know if anybody sits on the board, if you can mention that about, and I know that's a state thing with, the money and all of that stuff, but if they could recognize it, that they're kind of, and that's not just URI, a lot of the other colleges and university up on the east side, it's a hot issue.
I think you and I have talked about this way, way back when. But I have, and we've got a new president, which is wonderful. He's incredibly open to new ideas, to having a positive relationship with not only the legislators. He has monthly meetings with us. He invites us to to his home and on campus, and very close relationship. In fact, he'll be at the State House tomorrow, 3:45, to thank us for passing a quick bill on a naming of a building. But to me, it has been a priority to make sure that freshmen are housed on campus. And you need to do, 2 things, obviously, in order to make that happen. You need to provide, I would also like them to have no cars, because that's another issue that we encounter as residents of the South Kingstown and Narragansett, is the immense amount of traffic. So I have long advocated for freshmen having them be mandatory that they live on campus with no cars. And so That's something that I'll continue to work in. I've mentioned it briefly, but, last year was a little bit much. I think he had come in maybe at the end of the 2 sessions ago. Last year was his first one. But that is something that I am heavily committed to. I'd like to eventually see it come to freshmen and sophomores live on campus the first 2 years and then go, because, there are other schools within our state that do that. Brown, I know it's a private institution, but you have to live on campus until your senior year. And you cannot live off campus unless you've got, like a real special dispensation for it. And I think that, if we introduce transit into this, again, something I've been working on to get the transit passes for the students, that really will alleviate a lot of our problems. So we've also been given a lot of money federally to have a transit center at the university. And unfortunately, right now, RIPTA, as are all agencies, transportation agencies across the nation, having issues post-COVID with recovering. So they're not at the right spot to launch this the way that they would have prior to COVID. But, I'm certainly supportive of that moving forward.
Yeah, those ideas are all good, but you have to have the housing first so you can implement all that. That's what they really need, is more housing to alleviate the stress of Narragansett having to house as many students. I mean, one person, I think a couple weeks ago in the meeting, said there was over 7,000 students living here in the wintertime. We only have about 15,000 people here, so half our becomes a campus. So, just needs a little balance, but anything you can do when you're meeting with URI and about the dorm, I know it's an issue with a lot of money, but they have built some new dorms lately. They have, so I got to give them some credit. It's just not enough. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
and
all for serving.
if I can also add to that point, I agree with what Rep. Tansey said, and we have had conversations about, what it would take to be able to build more dorms, and part of it is the budget ask needs to come from URI to be able to move ahead with that. But in terms of the specific bill with the ordinances, one thing that I really would recommend is that if you have that information about what other municipalities would be negatively affected by this, you want to make sure to be raising that to their attention so that you can have kind of some collaborators with reaching out to the reps and senators that represent them to explain how this would negatively impact things. I've been watching it on the Senate side. I have not seen it be introduced yet. I know the previous year's sponsor is not inclined to take it again. And, it has been my view that if there is a need in other communities to have cooperative housing, basically, where, you would need to rent to maybe more than 4 or 5 unrelated people, then my simple request is that can only apply to 12-month leases. Because if we're providing a 12-month rental to a person, then we are providing housing for somebody who is going to be part of that community. And, so if that is the intention, then I think that there should be that provision in there, that is the reason why we're doing that, and that the intention actually matches what the impact is. So.
Thank you.
So I just want to ask, are we talking about House Bill 7382? Is that the one we're talking about, Steve?
Well, yeah, that's the
Okay.
latest iteration, and that one has up to.
That's the one that carves out the less than 3. On page 5 of that bill, it takes it out, and then it says 1 person per bedroom
Yeah, and the
shall
ma-
not exceed 5 unrelated persons per dwelling.
Right. So it's-
I will say this, the speaker has a, it's Jackie Baginski's. Yeah. I will say this, the speaker has a policy. If an issue is in active litigation, we will not touch it until the courts decide. So my understanding is this 3 unrelateds, or whatever number it is, it's 4 now? Okay. So until
3
that's
now.
decided, I don't think you're going to, I mean, that's been his policy. He does that. He did that with my bill on the statute of limitations for childhood sexual abuse. It was at the Supreme Court in Rhode Island for 2 years. We couldn't move on it until they decided. They just decided. Hopefully this year maybe we'll stop moving on it. But it's a policy in the House. So if this is in litigation, I don't see it moving until the courts decide.
Will you ask him to remove it for this time? If it's.
Well, he won't remove it.
We
He
can
won't-
give you the court.
He
we can
won't
give you
take
the
it
court
away.
date.
He'll hear it. He's not going to stop anybody from putting in a bill. It's just whether or not it gets across the finish line. And what I'm telling you is, if he's,
Saying he's.
you know, he's not going to put it, that's his policy. He said it, he sticks by it, he said it in his acceptance speech when he got the speaker again. So, I mean, I don't see him reneging on a thing like that. So
Would
that's
that
how
be
I feel about that one. I mean,
That's his view, but would that be a state, I see, you can debate
that's
it.
his policy
Yeah.
as speaker. It's not
Okay.
written in
And he
stone.
reiterated that on
Right.
Friday. I had a meeting with him and
Yeah.
said the same thing.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's an active
Potentially could
litigation, it's
pass,
not going to
yeah.
move forward until the courts deal with it. And then whatever the courts say is probably going to be what everybody has to do. So, you know,
Okay,
unless
thank
the
you.
court is wishy-washy and bounces it back to the state or the towns. I mean, I shouldn't say wishy-washy, I don't want to say that about the courts, but, you know, sometimes they bounce it back to the legislature or to the state. You know, it doesn't always get resolved.
Right,
But,
and this one hasn't been scheduled for hearing in the committee yet. But I know as, I think we're moving forward, we're going to be putting in resolutions that if we oppose the bills and try to get the
Yeah.
timing right on that
And
and
you should testify, like if this comes up for hearing and you feel strongly about it, you should, somebody from the town, designate someone, either the town manager or Mike DeLuca or one of yourselves, come up and testify. Let us know how serious it is. And I think you're in a unique position to do that now after how everything went last year.
Right.
So I just think you have to make more of an effort to get up there. I mean, we certainly can represent what you want, but we can't be in 5 places at one time. And like I'm on, you know, I'm chair of small business, I'm vice chair of judiciary, I'm on labor, I'm on environment. I mean, so I'm all over the place. But I can keep track of bills if you tell me which they are that you're concerned about.
Yeah, I'm keeping track of them too now.
And I am going to impress upon you how important it is to come up and testify. That's it.
Thank you. Council Wallen?
I just really want to reiterate with Steve, I mean, that's our most important issue that you guys can help us out with. I appreciate
Yes.
the bottle acts. I hate to see those little nip bottles at every single stop sign I go to as well. But that's our big thing.
Right.
I mean, we have 60 kids in our kindergarten class. We have no affordable housing. We could fill his houses that are current rental properties with young families, and that's what we want. That's
Right.
what this council is working so hard to gear all of our policies around that. We want to create a community. We want to be able to have our homestead people have benefits that they're not, but that's our biggest thing. If you could please ask the speaker to build some more dormitories. I mean, URI can put bills in for ballots, for the ballot initiative, right, for housing money. And also, too, if you could please remind him that they need to make sure when they admit people, they're admitting more people than they have housing for. And it's just causing this problem to happen. And it's not that we are tyrants, it's that we want to have a community. And it's been overseen by URI. I respect what you say, Teresa, as far as the president speaking with you, but they've never worked with us. I've met with different presidents over the years, and there's never been that. It's just been more.
Yeah, he's an unusual person in the sense that he is a part of the community. I've never seen a president take as much interest. I mean, they volunteer at the food pantry. He is everywhere all the time, everywhere on campus. Everyone calls him by his first name. I mean, he is a very unusually engaged and approachable person for the presidency. So, you know, and one other thing
He
about
is.
the housing, when it comes to building of the dorms, those are like your beach fund. So it's a closed account. So they bond for it, but it's not a bond, it's not like a general obligation bond like we do for roads and things like that. This is something that has a guarantee on its own, and all of that money is fed back into the system. So students are charged according to, you know, what it would take to fill that dorm, divided, you know, whatever it is. And so they're a much lower risk. So asking for bonding when it comes to housing is a significantly different experience than going and asking for a new engineering building. Or you know, we have like a new life sciences one, I think, or something like that on the bond this year. So, you know, something that's self-contained like that and pays for itself is not as much of a risk to the state. And so it almost, you know, it doesn't count towards our full bond ability.
So it makes it easier for you to do, so that would be greatly appreciated. I know that there's lots of land, let's face it, the speaker's a developer, he knows lots of people who could develop this.
He's a lawyer.
Well, he's a real estate attorney, developer, that's what he does for a living. He is an attorney, he works with developers.
Right, but he's an attorney, he's not
you know,
a developer.
That is up to the URI has to ask for this. They have their own way, they are an institution almost on their own that has to come forward and ask for what they need. But the other side of this, as a URI grad, I just want to say, historically, people live at URI freshman and sophomore year and then move down the line. It's part of the URI experience. Maybe it's too much for Narragansett at this point, but that has been the way it's been for many, many years, long before me and long after me. But I'm not saying that's good or bad. Part of that was fine when it didn't get too big, but URI is growing. And I mean, I think to think that URI could absorb all of those students, I don't think that's possible.
We're not asking for that. We're asking for a better balance, as Steve had mentioned before. And I also want to point out that there are other towns surrounding the community. The
Yes.
university is located in a town called South Kingstown.
Well, they've got a lot too,
Not as many as we
Well, they
have.
don't have as many
Nowhere near-
rental homes as Narragansett has.
But the reason that is because they don't have the students there. If it was turned around, if we had fewer students in here, there would be more rental homes over there.
Well, I don't know, Jill,
think
we
they
have
grow.
30,000 residents in South Kingstown.
Yeah.
That's a lot more than you have here, year-round. I mean, we're talking year-round.
Yep, but there are other towns, South Kingstown, North Kingstown, Richmond, there's all sorts of other, why that
If,
we have to
they've been
absorb
looking at a
them all.
homestead over there, just so you see the ratio. You know how you have like 50-50 of residents versus non-residents. They're not even close to that. Last they looked at it was 80-20. It's
South
probably now 70-30, maybe a little higher, but it's nothing
Yeah.
like Narragansett, because you've got the 50-50 ratio here. I mean, it really is almost that. If I'm off, it's a little bit, but it's close.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just a very popular place for people to buy summer homes.
Deb's tried dying to speak, so.
Sorry.
The only thing about that is that, what's happened is the rental market has priced residents out of the market altogether, and that's not the case necessarily anywhere else.
Right.
That and our relatively low taxes. So, I mean, the fact of the matter is that this is a complicated process and problem. In fact, one of the complications is that we don't necessarily have to bond for dormitories. There's other ways to create student housing, and for older students as well. I mean, there's a lot that could go on. But I think the person I think Steve referenced was a member of the student whatever they call it, the student senate at URI. And one of the points he made was that there's fewer than 6,000 opportunities for undergraduates to live on campus. There's probably about between 14 and 16,000 students who are undergraduates at URI. It seems absurd to me that the town of Narragansett is somehow responsible for greater than 50% of those undergraduates and where they live. And it's not just because it's a nice place to live. It's because, A, there's no place to live on campus, and B, I think it got really crazy when they decided to make it a dry campus, and everybody moved to Narragansett. So I think that all of us talk about balance all the time. We don't want to not have students. I did not go to URI, but I have 4 siblings who did. I have a nephew who's there right now. A lot of my family, my in-laws, I mean, everybody went to URI, and most of them lived for at least a year in Narragansett. I'm very familiar with the process, and I don't want to see it stop, but I would like to see us have a better balance, and I think that's what every one of us is kind of looking for and trying to find whatever solutions will make it possible to do this. Unfortunately, I do think that the university has somewhat abrogated their responsibility to these students, and because it's pretty nice not to have to, be responsible for the behavior, for whatever it is that happens with students, even though the vast majority of students are perfectly, decent people, except when you're driving down Point Judith Road and they're doing 70 miles an hour. But other than that, it's not that bad. Believe me, that's the scariest thing on earth, especially if you're on a bicycle. So this is, I think, what we're trying to get across.
You know, I
It's
would
very
recommend, South Kingstown has what they call a town gown meeting, at least once a year, sometimes twice with URI. I don't see why you couldn't do the same. If you want to give the president a call or his office, I could, you know, help you facilitate that. But I think that is that's where you air all your issues with URI. I mean, if you know, when I was on the council, we had very constructive meetings with them, because they, you know, they also need South Kingstown to grant them certain permits and whatnot. So we had a good relationship with them. And like you say, South Kingstown doesn't yet have the problem that you have, but I think it's growing, you know. But anyway, I would suggest maybe you start there.
They also have, South Kingston also has the 3 unrelated
Yes.
as an ordinance, just to point that out.
And don't you have that now?
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
And like over 50, about 56% of the other towns, municipalities, so it's important to keep that. Okay, so Mr. DeLuca, did you want to do you have any feedback, any comments, give you a few minutes, and then we'll go to the town manager and close up the work session.
Before I go forward, Council President, thank you for asking me to sit with you. And also, before I get started, tell me how many minutes I have, because I know you need a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I'll give you about 5 minutes, and
About
then
5
we'll give Jim a minute.
Everybody in the room knows why I asked that question. Thanks again to the reps and Senator DeMaio for coming. Really great. And the council members have raised a lot of questions that I had, but I do want to bring up a couple bills. One is the very, obviously, one of the larger, more important bills that are coming up is the ADU bill. Speakers very much behind that. And I wanted to just make a statement, putting on a different hat, by the way, as a member of the American Planning Association from Rhode Island, which is the professional organization that all town planners are in the state are members of. We have reviewed the draft bill, which is apparently the same bill as last year, and we have drafted a letter of support with suggestions for changes, and we would hope that our legislative caucus here could lend some support to our commentary. I will summarize it very briefly. We suggested that accessory dwelling units should be limited. They should be divided into by right and non-by right. And if they're by right units, they should have year-round leases. We also suggest that if they have year-round leases, that there would be an affidavit that would be submitted to the local community, to the town clerk, that would clarify that. We also feel very strongly that accessory dwelling units should never be allowed to be separated in any legal manner from the primary residence, because it could be very easily a very short jump to condominiumizing, and suddenly you now have 2 separate dwelling units. So those are the kinds of concerns we have. We also suggest that by right units should be within an existing building footprint or an existing building on the site. And we suggest certain sizes. I won't get into the weeds on that. In regard to the non-by right accessory dwelling units,
To what you said before, you said it's either part of the current footprint or restate.
or within a building that's already existing on site, such as a carriage house.
Like converting a shed or a garage.
Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
Okay. So an existing footprint regardless of whether it's attached or not.
Right.
Okay.
It says within the existing building footprint and height of any residential structure. So I may have stretched a little beyond that. I think our group has only spoken to the existing house, that it should be, by right should be limited to within the existing house. So I take back what I said a minute ago about accessory structures. But the third point would be about non-by right, and that could accommodate allowing accessory dwelling units to be incorporated within other structures on the site. And what we're primarily saying in there is that we ask that the General Assembly give us, the towns, flexibility to put our regulations in place as to how to handle these non-by right ones, so that we could set forth by zoning district the lot size requirements, the unit size requirements, and whether or not owner occupancy is necessary. So we see it as that, that divergence of the by right ones that would be easy to allow within existing structures, and then the non-by right ones that we would really like to see the localities be able to tailor to their individual community requirements. Certainly Narragansett is nothing like Providence, is nothing like Cumberland. We're different communities all around. So that's all I wanted to say about that. We have a letter that was sent to Chairman Casey of the House Committee on Municipal Government. That was mailed up on January 25th. If you'd like, I could photocopy a full set of this material for all of you and send it out.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I can do that.
Is this the letter
just as easily.
from Jane Weidman?
Yes, it is
Yes,
the
I
letter
have
from
that.
Jane.
So-
Jane is the planner in Charlestown.
You do want the owner occupancy, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. On both by right and non-by right?
No, on the non-by right, what we're saying is leave it to the communities to make
Okay.
that decision. Some communities might feel strongly about it and others might not. And we thought that might be a useful thing to, if you make that break between by right and non-by right, you can now drop different regulatory standards into those individual boxes. And leaving a little flexibility for the non-by right ADUs would be very helpful at the local level. The other thing I wanted to talk about is House Bill 7324. I'm calling it the FAR bill because the only change that is made is it's in the standard provisions for zoning, General Law 4524-33. It's part of the Zoning Enabling Act. And it speaks to the standard provisions that all zoning ordinances around the state have to follow. And it's simple things like, what we're allowed to do, permitting, prohibiting, limiting, restricting development of properties. It goes on and on. And then the section on permitting, regulating within each district certain things, the height, the number of units. These are typical zoning things, provisions that have been in ordinances for years. Sure. Representative Baginski, and supported by Representative Finkelman and Edwards. And then it goes on to the dimensions, size, lot, coverage, and floor area ratio. And Representative Baginski is suggesting that floor area ratio be eliminated.
Can you explain what that is, Mike, exactly?
I can very
Please.
quickly can, as long as I have the time. Floor area ratio is defined, I'm going to read it off my sheet so I give it to you, is defined as the aggregate floor area of a building divided by the total area of the lot. So say you had a 3-story house that had a 1,000 square foot footprint. That would be 3,000 square feet of floor space, right? 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. And say you had a 10,000 square foot lot. You would divide the 3,000 over the 10,000 and you would get an FAR of 0.3, 30%.
What does FAR mean?
Floor area ratio.
Okay, FAR.
So the floor area ratio to the lot area is 0.3. So one of the things that we feel pretty strongly about is that we be allowed to retain floor area ratio. The town of Narragansett has had it in place for the Breakwater Village neighborhood for over 13 years. It has worked wonderfully.
And when you said you had that, what'd you say, 0.3 on that in your?
That was just an example.
So what do you do with that number? I mean, is there,
There's a table.
there's a table, so 0.3 is good, but 0.10 is not good? or-
Right. In
point-
fact.
Tell me how this works.
What we do, we have a table in the zoning ordinance. It's right next to the same table that has the setbacks and the height and the lot sizes. And it states for any lot between 1,000 and 20,000 square feet, what the floor area ratio allowance would be. And at every 1,000 square foot break, and you go from 2,000 square feet of lot land to 3,000 to 4,000 to 5,000, the FAR changes slightly. And counterintuitively, the FAR allowance is higher for smaller lots and lower for larger lots.
Excuse me, Mike, I think Carol's trying to get at what is it trying to accomplish?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
What it's
I'm
trying to
starting to get it,
accomplish,
though. He's
very
getting there.
simply, is to ensure that residential structures are balanced with the land they're sitting on. We have seen in this town many, many applications for houses to, little cottages to be demolished, cottages that are smaller than this room, and to replace them with, I'll use the term McMansions, it's an old term, but buildings that are so big for the house, for the lot, that when you take up the land area for the septic system when necessary, the parking area, there's almost no yard left. And when you've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bedrooms in those houses, you've got to have a lot of parking space. So we are concerned
Do
about.
decks count, sheds count, garages? No.
In our ordinance, decks and sheds do not count, nor does garages.
Okay.
Parking is a requirement based on number of bedrooms, but it doesn't count against floor area. It's not a floor.
But there's still a limitation, so
Yes.
a house on a stamp, you wouldn't be able to put a big mansion because there's already requirements on parking. There's other requirements beside the floor area ratio?
Yes, lot coverage, certainly, and setbacks, as you know.
So
But
if
we
you
have
take
seen-
this floor area ratio out of this,
You're right.
out of this statute,
Okay.
you're essentially allowing them to build anything?
Well, let me say this.
Or you still have all your other tools in the toolbox?
We do, but without the floor area ratio requirement, a 10,000 square foot lot with a 25% lot coverage allowance could have a 7,500 square foot house on 10,000 square feet. That's a very large house. The effects we get from that are people not using their driveways. They create long driveways that are 8 cars deep, and nobody's going to park in the 8th space because then they have to move 7 cars to get out. So they wind up utilizing the street for parking or the front yard. There's not sufficient area for just family use of the parcel itself. And we've actually seen in certain cases, this is in Breakwater Village albeit, but where a property owner who was building a house on a small lot and was, before the FAR was in place, actually placing his or her building materials on the next door neighbor's lot. The next door neighbor was not aware of that because they didn't have enough space on their own lot to lay down the 2x4s and all the other things that you need. So we feel pretty strongly that the balance created by the floor area ratio is valid and worth supporting and retaining. I would also point out the floor area ratio has been in the zoning enabling law since 1991 as an allowance to the town. Other communities have used it. The New Shoreham uses something called livable space. They don't call it floor area ratio, but it does the same thing. So I would ask that you give some consideration to those thoughts. I've drafted up some comments on that. To be honest with you, I want to refine them, but I would like to send them along.
Yeah,
Thanks.
please send them
All right,
along.
thanks. And then just for the sake of time, so also just the housing affordability piece of it, when, if you want to just take 30 seconds to speak to like bigger houses are not more affordable.
Well, of course, certainly, the last number I got was somewhere around $200 per square foot is the cost of building a house. So when you think about the prospect of a 7,500 square foot house on a 10,000 square foot lot, it certainly doesn't move us any closer to affordability. With the FAR table we have today, the FAR limit for a 10,000 square foot lot is 0.31.
Do you think this bill, the purpose of this was affordable housing? I don't.
I don't
know,
believe
so.
this bill is
I don't
at
know what the
all for
purpose is.
affordable housing.
Yeah.
It's doing just the opposite.
It's doing the
But I
opposite.
find it uniquely interesting that the only alteration to this
Right.
particular set of provisions is to remove a restriction that communities have the right to utilize. So that's,
Okay,
I'll
thank-
turn it back to you,
thank
Council
you.
President.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
again,
we have
thank
to-
you for the time.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just finally will let Mr. Tierney, if he has any final comments or any thoughts before we close up this work session.
First of all, I'd like to thank the council and our legislative delegation for working together with the council and the town staff. I've had a wonderful working relationship with all three of them since I started here, from their assistance with the galley landing fee, the sales of the abandonments in the town, and of course, Take It Outside, Carol and Alana. We worked quite a bit on that one. And I would also like to publicly thank, again, Carol McEntee for what I call her legacy legislation, supporting the victims of abuse throughout the state. And that's a big one. Appreciate it. And it's always good to recognize the good work that all of you do. And we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for coming. I know Senator DeMaria she's a healthcare provider, and she had to make some adjustments to her schedule so that she could join us today. I thought it was important to be here, like just as the legislative session was kind of going into gear, and making sure that if there was any opportunities that we could utilize to, maybe have legislation put forward that would help our town. And just having a work session. This has been a great session, collaborative, and again, thank you for all the work you do representing our beautiful town. So thank you. And this